Okay. There's welcome back to yet another TYC Friday afternoon. There's no real agenda today other than to connect and chat. I thought I might ask people, just since I had recent experience. I received my second dose of the Moderna vaccine a week ago Wednesday. A week ago Thursday was a rough day. I'll put it that way. That's the second dose. I had side effects. There's an informal experiment going around my institution called the Margarita Protocol. So far, the dozen faculty who have celebrated their second dose with margaritas have had little to no side effect from the second dose. That was not the case for me. Apparently, the whiskey protocol is not the way to go.
At my school, they're still saying, Illinois says that you're supposed to get it sometime.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was just interested in, is it's so widely, weirdly different everywhere. Higher ed faculty were pretty high on the list in Nevada, but it turned out to be difficult to get an appointment to actually get vaccinated because we were in the same group as 65 plus seniors, and we have a lot of retirees, particularly in my area. So I had to drive an hour from my house to a vaccine clinic in another county, so to get vaccinated, but I have been. Yeah, I just thought it was interesting to see what's going on and see if anybody else had weird experiences there. But again, no real agenda today. Just what do you guys want to talk about?
Well, I'm starting to see, what is the word for it? Comments from higher up about changing styles of grading, changing content in order to lean more towards the, what is it called? Performance or something like that, where
mastery grading.
Mastery or competency based or something like that.
Yeah, and yet providing nothing to indicate any sort of scale that both Stanford and University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign will accept. And being a two-year college, I have had some students go to Stanford on full scholarship transfer. I've had students go to University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, had one student go to University of Alaska for intending to become a petroleum engineer. And if I'm going to change my way of grading, I need a system that will be accepted at all schools to which my students will transfer. And I have not yet received that or received any indication of it. So I don't know what to do with this.
Ken, I have a question.
Yeah.
If the final output of your grading, however you do it, is a letter grade,
yes,
how does any receiving institution know how you came up with that letter grade? And is it their business in the first place?
Because I have to provide a complete official syllabus of the course, which includes how the grade is reached, includes the assignments, includes this, that doesn't have the tests written, but what they are, how many there are, and what qualifies as an A, a B, a C, a D, or none of the above. Have to provide a complete syllabus for the class to be accepted at most schools, especially out of state.
Wow. Finally, a state that's worse than North Carolina.
I've had requests like that from I've had students transfer to various places out of Nevada, and it's not unusual for me. They'll send me a message and say, "Hey, can you send your syllabus to this email address because they want to know what was in your class?" And I
So
say,
my
"Well, I can
question is,
send it, but I don't
do
know
the
what
four-year schools do this as well? Because my response would generally be to pound sand. It's none of their business how I do my grading.
Well, if they're
Let's
going
face
to,
it, the
if
four-year
they're going to
schools don't have
transfer
to
it, they
do
have to know what it is, because physics 211 is different in each state. Different states require different content. For example, in Illinois alone, 20 years ago, waves had to be part of first semester mechanics. Now,
Said
waves do not have to be part of first semester mechanics.
Said who? Said who?
Illinois
handed down this?
Articulation Initiative.
Okay, so this was a statewide articulation agreement.
Yes.
Agreed.
And
Was this imposed unilaterally, or did both sides have input on this?
this was done after like a year-long talk, and it was decided, since most colleges were going to 3-semester, 4 hours.
But who did the talking? Was it the universities telling the community colleges, or was it community colleges and the four-year schools in the same room?
It was universities saying what they would accept.
Yeah, see, that's a problem.
And different universities and different colleges require different things.
You're in an impossible situation then. Your autonomy has been compromised. There's really no good solution on your part. That's very unfortunate. That's where this state is headed as well.
Yeah, Illinois has been like that for at least 30 years.
I mean, geez, I'm just going to stop talking because
that's why Illinois is considered one of the lowest level for education, especially K through 12.
I even have community colleges. This is what I talk about when I say we have a nationwide identity crisis. We are subservient to too many masters, and it's got to end.
Well, ICC physics, as it is accepted almost everywhere. But that's only because of what we've made of it, and adapted and adjusted and twisted and turned until it fit minimums for.
I would just like to see this go
public.
the opposite. I would like to see us approach the four-year schools and say, hey, your lecturing is harming our students after we transfer. You need to stop that, and just watch the laughter as they show us the door. I think this is abuse, to be perfectly honest.
Well, in physics, though,
AAPT take a stand on this issue.
In physics and engineering, a lot of the four-year colleges are preparing the students for graduate school, not for a job. And they have to get the students to where they will be accepted by the graduate schools.
But the graduate schools themselves cannot even agree on what the entrance requirements are. There's so much hypocrisy in this handing down policies.
Entrance requirements for graduate schools depends on individual major.
And it also depends on the individual institution. They're not as uniform as they want us to pretend to be. It's very hypocritical.
Well, they can't be that uniform, because if they are, then you wouldn't have one institution appealing to one field so much, while another institution appeals to another field so much. Because quite often, if a person wants to go into say a certain field of engineering, they will choose the graduate school that is most appealing to the industry they're going into, and not a graduate school that is not appealing to that industry. So it goes back to, you've got many different industries, many different areas within the industries, and they're the ones that decide what they want. What do they want their new employees to be able to do? And most of them want them to be able to do just about anything. Truly adaptable. I don't care if you know everything, because when you come here, you're going to be exposed to secret stuff that is not in any textbooks and never will be. That's what engineering corporations tell me. And they tell me that they want to choose from graduate schools that specialize in a certain way so that when their students come out, they will be able to adapt really well to their particular interests. And they choose graduate schools that focus on their particular interests. They look at those graduate schools first. Quite often we'll go and choose the student before the student graduates. I've talked to people in hiring in corporations like Caterpillar, and they will actually peruse the graduate dissertations to look for an idea that appeals to them before the students have graduated, and will choose those students to continue their project as what they do when they're hired. And then as it goes through, the student will work on the initial development. And once the initial development is complete and it moves towards production, the student is transferred into production to ride with the project. And then as the project goes into further development, the student is moved with the project. And then that person will carry through for maybe 20 years on that one project, moving from level to level until you reach maintenance. And then that student will go into hiring the next group. You don't go into an industry anymore and do the same job for 20 years. You stick to the same project for 20 years as it goes and is developed and is advanced. And when that project is no longer needed, when that device is completely kaput and worthless, then you go into training people who are doing the stuff that will replace what you were working on, hiring and training. This is what I've been told by people, some are very good friends, who hire for Caterpillar. And this is how it is done in industry now. It's not done with.
That's not my experience with industry in Nevada at all.
We don't
Different.
cater to industry. We've got to stop. We cater to
To
students.
probably segue into the discussion Glenda talked about. I think we're gonna go into rabbit trails.
Yeah, and it's just this is what University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign is dealing with. And most of Illinois is determined by what U of I or Urbana-Champaign wants.
So you
Because
have
most
essentially
people
no
are there.
control over your own classroom. Is that what
I can
I'm
do,
hearing?
I can teach whatever I want. It's just I don't have any control over whether it will be accepted.
I have a different experience with U of I, but I don't want to go there.
Yeah. As I can set my class to work any way it wants as long as the syllabus is accepted by the college. But whether it will transfer, I have no control over.
Well, here in North Carolina, we are under a legislated comprehensive articulation agreement, and the law says that the course will transfer. End of discussion. And we don't have to. The only time we have to send a syllabus is if it is requested by an institution that is not part of the UNC system. Now, there are private schools that participate in the statewide articulation agreement. They do so voluntarily, but state-funded schools, they don't get a say-so. And the UNC system hates this because it requires them to accept courses that they don't necessarily want to accept. But we don't have to send an individual syllabus to the institutions. I would not do so. We just have autonomy problems, it seems to me. And I'm hearing this more and more across the country, and it really scares the dickens out of me. It's like, why do we even need 2-year colleges if all we're going to do is what the 4-year schools dictate to us?
Well,
That
a
doesn't
lot of
bode
four-year
well to the
schools
community
prefer
colleges.
students, like Bradley University, which is a private college, actually sends their students to us for introductory chemistry or calculus and introductory physics. They will advise their students to come to us because our classes are 25 to 30 students and Bradley's introductory classes are 300. So they actually advise their students to come to us. And sometimes half of our class will be students from Bradley. Other colleges in our group will advise their students to come to ICC for at least their first year. Because at their university, at their place, first semester courses and sometimes second semester are no less than 300. And they will never speak with the instructor ever, because the instructor will spend maybe 75% of his or her time at the research location. U of I students who came from ICC in engineering do half a point better in third-year courses than students who started at U of I.
Yeah, I don't think those sorts of problems are going to go away, and they they exist ever. There's some appetite to talk about.
Yeah, but that's
looking at the chat. There's some appetite to discuss plans for fall, I guess.
okay.
There's been some discussion. It seems like the discussion kind of matches with what my institution is doing with we want to try to get back in person, but we don't want to commit to anything. That's the sentiment here. Anybody else have?
Yeah, my institution has officially stated as many labs as possible on campus, so long as it does not exceed 12 people per room. And no courses, no actual classrooms on campus unless necessary.
Oh, I've heard that we have a problem with the testing, that even right now, there are some classes happening in person in our campus, and it's just too many people for them to test. Even now, they are not good enough at testing. The university, Stony Brook, is a four-year institution 5 miles up the road. They do they choose a poll of people randomly, right? And then select. So maybe that's what we need to do. I don't know. We haven't got our game together because one of the things our administration is saying is it's going to be too many people if we are also in person, and we have to keep the testing regiment, right? That SUNY requires, and we can't do it. We can't test everyone. Yeah. So that's funny.
We just got an email today that the state of Oregon thinks everybody will have access to a vaccine by July 1. So that would change everything pretty dramatically.
I've heard 600 million will be available by July. 600 million vaccines in the country would be available by July. So that's a lot. Yep. I guess
my
things will
experience
improve.
In
I
my
guess things will
experience with
improve
my
fast.
state, if they get access by July, they will figure out how to get it to the people by November. That's how Illinois works. At least that's been my experience in many situations. They get.
Hey, Tom. Sorry, Ken. Can you tell us more about that high flex thing you just mentioned? Because that sounds horrible.
It is. There are some advantages, I'll say that. But this was sort of, I've been doing it since fall. I was asked in last summer, the administration approached me and said, hey, we want some people to try this flex class. They're now calling it high flex. I don't know. They can use whatever jargon they want. But I have students that log in via Zoom, and I have students that show up in person in the classroom. The tech that I have to try and support that is insufficient, and I have said so. And they're working on it. But yeah, it's a challenge. The getting students that are just online to interface with each other was hard when everyone was online. Getting students that are in the class was kind of hard to get, but it's easy. You can wander around and loom, right? And get some interaction going that way. That's harder to do online. It's nearly impossible to get students in the classroom interacting with students that are online. It has happened, but I'm not sure that I made it happen. I'm not sure how it happened or how to promote that. It is a real challenge. It is very different sort of teaching than either purely online or purely in person. It's extremely challenging. I will say this though, students really like it. They really like that they have that choice, that they go, oh, if I'm sick, I don't just miss class because I can't be there in person. Or, oh, my truck broke down, right? As for reason, my class, I have synchronous class sessions, which are more like working sessions of problem solving and discussion and questions from the group. I have asynchronous lectures.
So Tom, it sounds a lot like where I used to work. The biotech classes were a lot like that, and a lot of people who were taking the biotech classes were working full time, and so then these classes would be in the evening, and there was a lot of tech infrastructure to make that happen, and everything is lecture based, right? So I just don't see how
it's much harder to do. I have the lecture, I call them lectures. They're really these little asynchronous videos for them to watch of me chatting and doing example problems and whatnot. And they're I think the longest one is 16 minutes. And so far, the views of those videos by my students do not match the numbers that they say are actually viewing the videos. They seem to not realize that the computer counts for me. But they're anyway, the synchronous meetings are really supposed to be, and it's hard to do, but they're supposed to be much more interactive, and getting that level of interactivity. And when I said I need the students to talk to the other students, I got blank stares from the tech people. Like, why would that be a thing? And it's really, really hard to do. And I basically don't have the tech to make it happen easily, at least right now.
What I've been able to do to get that happening, and it does work, is pick 2 or 3 end of chapter problems, depending on how much time they take. Ones that don't take as much time. Use a situation where split up the class into groups of about 4 people with the breakout rooms in Zoom. Have the students do what Wolfson and
see that won't work in my situation, because I have students that are in person and students on Zoom.
Yeah,
and so
you have both.
I can't get the students that are in person to be in the breakout room with the students that are on Zoom.
Yeah, there'd be no way to interact both of them with each other.
That's the hard interaction.
Everybody has to go on Zoom, even though they're in your class, but like on the computer at class, and go on Zoom and then.
Well, one of the stated reasons for I want to come to class in person is I don't have a good computer, or I don't have a computer at all. And I don't want to Zoom on my phone, which is legit.
Yeah. What do you have to engage the students with remotely? Because I have I've been teaching Zoom synchronously. We're rural, so I've been doing this for a while. And the biggest change that I had was when they it was about a 44 or 50-inch touchscreen TV at the front of their classroom, so that the boxes of students on Zoom were actual real sizable images.
Yeah, there's no such thing in my classroom. There is a pen screen monitor that has had its resolution limited to a sparkling 1024 by 768 so that it can match the projector's resolution that's in that room. This is really a cobbled together system of brand new this year technology all the way back to a good 1999 style projector. It is a hot mess.
Yeah, our school mentioned is starting they sent out a poll to see if we were interested in HyFlex and all these different learning options. One thing they mentioned at my school is the students could switch in their engagement from synchronous to asynchronous to remote anytime they wanted. So how do you give an exam to students online, in person, and they could switch at the last minute and decide where they want to be? I have friends with a number of high school teachers around Chicago who've been doing this flex model all semester, and they say it's a disaster. It does not improve learning outcomes. And I had actually a friend who, she had 3 to 6 people in her class. She's homesick with COVID. She got it from an asymptomatic student. So they were masking, they were doing the plexiglass, 3 to 6 kids in the class, and she still got COVID. So I'm sort of skeptical about even attempting that myself.
Well, the APT winter meeting had a interesting talk. I don't know how many of you saw that, but that was a researcher from Duke, I think, looking at transmission of saliva droplets, basically, with light. And I mean, basically the take-home message is nowhere indoors is safe. There's just insufficient ventilation right now. Even, I mean, we don't have perfect masks, right? Shields don't do anything because it isn't the big droplets that are causing the problems. It's these aerosolized particles, right? So, I mean, anywhere indoors is just not good for keeping us safe. And yet, CDC and other governing, or they're not really governing, but they're supposed to be the experts, and they're so slow on updating their information. But,
yeah, guys, I mean, Ken, I know you were saying some things that are very sad, etc. I mean, the status, but I'm Brazilian. Have you guys heard what's happening in Brazil? What a chaos, what a mess. I can't really talk a lot about the horrible things, and I won't.
The only other physics person
vaccinated.
I'm fully vaccinated. I have about a week to go to achieve best immunity according to Moderna.
How did you do that? In our state, they say we don't count as far as teachers.
I count because I'm already teaching in person. I already was. And they said higher ed, frontline higher ed in workers get high on the list. And so that said, like I said, I had to get an appointment in the next county over and drive for an hour each way to get to a clinic where there were vaccines available. But yeah, it's just the Nevada policy. It's the hodgepodge.
If they want us in the classroom,
policy.
They got to get us the vaccine.
It's the hodgepodge of policy that's a big mess. We need some. So my opinion is we need some better, stricter policy from on high.
It's true here too. My husband teaches an in-person class, and he can get the vaccine now, and he receives alerts. Yeah. In person. It needs to be in person. I'm not yet. So.
Not because I'm not allowed to yet, because I can't convince the world that it must be. Lab I can have in person, but that doesn't count. Here, has to be a classroom. quite often the liberal arts side does not consider labs to count as classes.
Yeah, there have been supply chain issues too. Nevada canceled half a dozen vaccine clinics last weekend because they just didn't get any.
Hey, I have a quick question to kind of wing on what Ken just said. In our school, we're having a really hard time convincing the administration that putting the labs online has been a hardship. They don't seem to understand what running labs is and how, like, now that I have, let's just say my class of, I have a double sections. I have a class of 48 and I'm doing 48 individual lab sets with 48 different sets of data and 48 different sets of graphs. Whereas before, if I could put them in groups, right, I could have 12 sets of data and graphs to track over the 48 students, and that would significantly cut my workload. Or some weeks I could have the flex option of having them turn in the lab as groups, right? Which is good experience for them to work in groups. And I have zero options like that anymore. And my whole like school is all like, you know, labs, aren't they just like computer graded, like homework? And I'm just wondering, do you guys see similar?
I started to do what you're doing and I quickly changed that because I was going insane. So now I've structured the lab so that everyone at least is going to be giving me the same data. So I am grading the individual labs, but it's not, if the data is not within a particular, you know, expectation, I know they didn't do it right. So, you know, I'm telling them exactly what the angle of the incline needs to be. They don't get to pick it. And I have, for every lab kit, I have created a video, and the video is, they have to watch it and they have to do the lab setup before we meet for lab, because we meet for lab online. So I prepare these videos with step-by-step, I mean, just painfully step-by-step instructions on how to set it up so everyone does get the same results. And the students can collaborate too, since they are, you know, their setups are supposed to be identical. And so once I made those videos, my life changed. It's good. It's good again.
I make similar videos. I totally agree, but I like the addition of data synchronization. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So that, because I was in your, I was ready to quit. I was like, I'll give up my retirement. I can't grade all these insane labs like this anymore. And so once I did that, it's much calmer now.
Are you using Pivot? Or are you using on take-home labs? I mean,
I have.
I meant for Reagan.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Reagan, are you using lab kits or are you using Pivot?
So I am using lab kits, but the switch to Pivot might be in my future because of my sanity. I'm putting physics 3. I don't know how many of you guys get to teach quantum mechanics online, but I'm the one who gets to put that class online. And that is destroying my soul, how to do that. And in addition to teaching 2 sections of the algebra-based physics, I'm trying to cut back on that algebra-based physics course. It's a struggle.
Oh, Reagan, I'm very interested in hearing what you're doing, because this is my first time teaching quantum mechanics. And doing what I am doing is for the labs, I'm creating, you know, the quantum, the Fizzlets. Have you seen the Fizzlets online? So I'm creating like a lab for them to do these simulations. So I'm happy to share that, but I have nothing. It's like, so that's my lab so far. Yeah,
I'm doing a lot of waves labs, a lot of thermo, because there's little bits of thermo and waves in the class, though the main chunk is quantum, and I don't have very many labs for quantum either. Right. So I'm filling in.
I taught these students the waves and thermo last term. I can't do the same lab, so I need quantum stuff. Yeah,
I was able to convince the
suggestion for Reagan for labs. I'm on the IAI committee. There are no labs required for physics 3 or for the quantum physics component. So if you didn't want to do the labs, you should be able to get away with it.
Well, glad to know that after the fact.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do that for a while. Thanks, Theo.
And I owe you some lab ideas. I keep forgetting. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
You taught it, and you taught it online, right?
I had a number of simulation-based labs, and this is like historical because I was required to do these professional development things that only happened during my lab section. And so in order to be able to teach my lab and fulfill my professional development requirements at the college, I had to come up with something that they could do on their own.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I do have some. I will try to put some things on the
Sure.
Slack. I'm going to do it right now so I won't
Cool.
forget again.
The things that I have made for the Fizzless I can put up too, but it's just relativity right now. But it's well made. You said that you use those too, but I'm kind of creating a guide for do this and then a bunch of questions on what did you get, things like that. Yeah. But I would love to see those, Chris. Thanks.
Those of you teaching quantum, you're at 2-year colleges, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What students take the quantum courses? That's what I'm curious about. I mean, like, how many sections do you offer, and do you have a lot of students, and do they really sign up for them?
One section, chemical engineering, requires quantum in most colleges.
Well, yeah, I know that at 4 years they require it, but
No, they require it in the introductory sequence to transfer. A lot of colleges require that they take the modern physics, have some modern physics. We just have an 8-week course devoted to relativity and quantum physics.
So for us, I have 35 students. We offer it once a year in the spring, so one section. And my class size is supposed to be 28. I added all those on the waiting list too, so I have 35. So,
I usually get about 12 students.
yeah. So, and I don't think some of them are concurrently taking my waves and thermal, which I'm also teaching this term. Also,
Yeah,
so I don't think it's a requirement for a lot of them. They're computer science, but they rather take it at the community college than later, maybe. I don't know.
So do they take it, like, do you have a prerequisite? They have to take physics 1 and physics 2 and then quantum, or?
That's what I thought, right? This is the first time I'm teaching it. No, the prerequisites is physics 21, which is calculus-based mechanics.
That's it.
Strongly
Same.
suggested that they have taken E&M and that they have taken the waves and thermal. So I'm saying to my students who have taken the waves and thermal, I'm so glad that you're here. Because, yeah, and to the rest, I'm saying I'm going to be referring to things that you should have seen by now,
Oh.
My course has 24 in it. It's once a year. I usually have 16. Oddly enough, I have 9 students who are University of Illinois current students taking it online with me at the community college, which has created a whole uproar at the community college. We're all like, whoa, let's do that more often, steal from U of I. I don't think that's sustainable, but anyhow, so that's how ours is. Engineering students mainly.
Interesting.
Yeah, ours too. But chemical engineering, materials engineering, anything that's going to have to do with molecular structure. Computer engineering is leaning towards it with anticipation of quantum computers becoming big.
Yeah, it used to be that way in Nevada. Some things have changed. I used to teach it every spring, but that's been 5 years ago. Even at the university, they're at the University of Nevada, Reno, that third semester physics, which would include quantum, is calc-based physics, is they get enrollments at the university of like 25 or 30, because the only students that have to take it in Nevada are physicists. And so, I mean, when I had 10, they said, "How did you get 10?"
Wow. Yeah, it's the prereq that I was curious about, because I know most students will take like physics 1 and 2, and then they're done with community college. Then they go on to the 4-year. It never dawned on me that a little bit more advanced. I mean, we have the calc 1, we have the calc physics 1, calc-based physics 2, but I didn't know that something would fly to community college after that. But if you're not requiring physics 2 before quantum, oh my, that's painful.
Yeah,
I'm
but
surprised
I guess
oh, go ahead,
it's
Tony.
not really quantum. I mean, when you call it quantum, it looks like it's really it's modern physics. And so you do relativity for a while, then you're gonna do quantum.
Okay.
Sometimes you might never really get to quantum. So I
No,
mean,
so
you get it.
we have a course outline that I'm, following. So it's relativity, it's quantum, and then it's the application of both of those, which is, nuclear physics, particle, and a bit of, maybe I won't get to it, cosmology at the end. I don't know if I'll get to that.
Yeah.
Mine's
A
more
lot of-
like barosons with a little thermo at the beginning instead of the particle and cosmology.
Yeah, we actually have you have to take physics 1 and 2 to take modern at Oakton. I'm not sure why some schools, I'll have to check the IAI because I thought they were both required beforehand. We get about 6 to 16 students once a year. And I'm impressed at how many students Reagan got. We are really low this spring. I think we have under 10.
I stole them.
Well, no, I probably. But yeah, I think in the future, a lot of students, you could retain those U of I students because we've had so many students. I advise students before they transfer to U of I take physics 3 because over the last decade or so, I've had so many students who drop out of U of I, come and take it at Oakton, then go back to U of I because it was such an impossible class for them at U of I. So you could hold on to those students with an online class, I think.
Yeah, we've got physics 1, which is a semester, physics 2, E&M is a semester, thermodynamics is half of fluids and thermodynamics is the first 8 weeks, and then modern physics is the second 8 weeks of the third year, but it is 2 separate courses. And some students will take the modern physics because it happens to be at the same time as the thermodynamics, which is the first 8 weeks of the semester. Others will take it because it is strongly recommended by where they're planning on going, considering the field they're going into.
When do you do optics?
Optics is, well, depends. Geometric optics is at the end of electricity and magnetism.
And then you separate the two.
Physical optics, which is diffraction and refraction and interference, is the first week of modern physics.
I see. So for us,
we use that to get into light.
Yeah.
And then we use light to get into relativity. And then we use relativity at one end. Now let's look at the other extreme and see what happens with photons, and then electrons, and then particles and spin and atomic structure. Atomic structure is something that is considered important for a lot of the fields that they go into that require it. They want them to understand atomic structure deeper than the first 2 years of chemistry provides in some fields of engineering. But materials engineering is one that very much wants them to have covered the physics of atomic structure. Because the chemistry doesn't get into the physics of it. It gets into the properties of it, but it doesn't get into things like the properties of spin. It talks about it, but never does it get into angular momentum, never does it get into the orbitals, and never does it get into the difference between a fermion and a boson.
Hey, Joe, what's going on in the chat?
I was going to show, well, several things apparently, but I was trying to share the Coke can photoelectric effect video that I made a year ago this month, as a matter of fact, but for some reason, Zoom won't let me browse for files on my local machine. It usually does. I have no idea why. So I'm putting that on YouTube right now. and I'll put the link on YouTube. I did not invent this demo. I saw it on YouTube. I think I saw Rhett Elaine do it with an electroscope. And then after some Googling around, I saw somebody do it with a Coke can. And I went to, I have made sort of a side hobby this semester of collecting UVC light sources. And I found them a couple weeks ago at Dollar Tree for $1.
Wait, what?
Uno
You mean those little battery
dinero.
operated things? Those little,
And I even bought some UVC detector cards on Amazon, and these are real, these are genuine UVC, okay? Now, the problem is I haven't been able to get the $1 ones to work as well. I found a $6 one at a certain big box retailer, Walmart, last semester for $6. It seems to work well. The ones I purchased before Christmas for $30 work perfectly. And the one I use in the video was actually a UVC aquarium light that I paid $15 for on Amazon, almost exact. Well, it was a year ago this month. And but yes, you can get the part for these dirt cheap. And I was always under the impression until February of last year that the photoelectric effect required a major laboratory setup. And I'm so glad it doesn't. This really changed my world because now I can show them quantum stuff. And I have, I don't have them here with me, but I have UVA and UVB lights that I have acquired. I bought for like $7. I got a set of LED flashlights on Amazon that had a red, green, blue, and a UVB. So you can clearly demonstrate that illuminating the can with different lights doesn't work until you illuminate it with that UVC. And then, I use fronds, I call it the Cthulhu effect. I use plastic fronds off of a party whistle that I got 6 for $1 at the dollar. There's a dollar store literally around the corner from my house here. And it's just a little mecca for me. You get a Coke can for $1. You get a pack of party whistles that have these Mylar fronds, for lack of a better word, on them. And you tape it to a styrofoam cup, you sand the paint off. Apparently, you have to sand the paint off. And apparently this works because the work function of aluminum is low enough that it will work with a simple handheld sanitizing UVC light. You can't get those at the dollar store, at least not Dollar General. There's Dollar Tree, Dollar Store, and Dollar General. I buy groceries at Dollar General. I found the UV light at Dollar Tree. $1. I bought 10 of them on the hopes that they actually work. You'll see it in the video. Let me see if it's uploaded to YouTube. Let's see. But anyway, it looks like it's uploading. I'll post the link as soon as I get it uploaded. But it really does work, and there are lots of cool things you can do with it. You can illuminate the can with different lights. You can use white light. You can show that bright light doesn't matter. It's independent of the intensity. It's sensitive only to the frequency. It's just really cool. And I know that the dollar store, they're kind of small. The key is to go at a time of day when your dollar store is not heavily populated. And early mornings and late evenings tend to be the best times to go. Don't go in the middle of the day. Don't go around mealtime when people are getting off work, because they pop in there to get their snacks and everything. But early in the morning or late in the evening is when I go. And it's a calculated risk. I wear a mask and sanitize everything in sight. But there's some really good physics bargains there. Like at Dollar Tree for $1, you can get a green tablecloth that makes a good green screen. $1. I found that idea on YouTube and I tried it and it worked. The problem was I didn't have anything to hold it with. So I actually won a $100 Amazon gift card about 2 weeks ago, and I used that to purchase a real green screen. So, but the one, if you've got a way to hold it, the $1 tablecloth from Dollar Tree, it does work. It does work.
What about this mastery thing? Chris had something about lab grading. If you're going to simplify my lab grading, I'm all ears.
Are you talking to me?
Or Chris.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There was a discussion on there, both of you.
Yes. I am trying out mastery-based grading, and so far so good. I had my first assessments this week, and it took a really long time to go through, but it got a lot faster as I started anticipating what issues there were. But the lab grading was pretty amazing. So first of all, the labs are on Zoom and they're in real time. And so I'm having them just do it in Google Docs. And it's not reports, it's just notes. So what are you doing as you're doing it? What are you thinking about? Blah, blah, blah. And then there's a section at the end for conclusion, summary, final thoughts. And basically it's, they have to, in order to get a B in the course, they have to have, I can't remember, the majority of the labs be at least satisfactory, right? Which means they did everything and they kind of applied some physics, it mostly appropriately, right? To get commendable, so in order to get an A in the course, they need to have a few commendable labs, and that involves just going above and beyond. So, you know, they did everything and they did something more. They did some extra background research. They analyzed data in a different way. They thought about another experiment and conducted it. So I go through with the labs and I insert comments like, oh, did you think about this? What about that? And don't forget your units, you know, that kind of thing. And then at the end, it's like, okay, this was satisfactory. Good job.
The biggest thing you have to do when switching to standards-based is you have to be willing to abandon everything that you have been conditioned you think is required, because it is not. And I realize that that's a controversial statement, and I realize that some people simply aren't going to buy it. You have to be willing to abandon the status quo, because as long as you stick to even a sliver of the status quo, it's not going to work. And you have to be willing to push back pretty hard against the external influences who tell you that you cannot do this way. Pound sand, it's your classroom. You are in charge. And the end result will be so much greater than you ever imagined.
Yeah, but I question that. I was one of the first people to jump on mastery grading years ago, probably 13 years ago, something like that. I did it for 3 years and I stopped because other people were following suit with me for the mastery grading. And there were two big issues I found with it. One is that it increased my workload. I found I was grading and regrading and regrading and regrading because some students just don't get it. And they want, you know, to achieve that level. Some students just took an incredible amount of time. And I'm not talking 1 or 2 students. I could have lived with that. I'm talking up to 50% of my students, sometimes more. And it was driving me crazy. So that was one of the issues I found with it. And I'm kind of hoping, because I've been sitting here reading, that maybe somebody had figured out a solution to that. The other thing I found is that not everyone who implements mastery is implementing it to, I don't know, I don't want to use this word, but I can't think of anything more appropriate at the moment to convey the thought process, a minimum standard. So for example, I teach the higher level physics classes. That means I need, and so we have a sequence. So I'm teaching the students in their second and third semesters of physics. If they don't learn the basics in the first semester, then when I get them in the second semester, I have to not only teach them the basics, but then teach them what's expected of them to learn the second semester. And then when they get to the third semester, if they didn't have me in the second semester, oftentimes they still don't have the basics from the first semester because the standards of the previous teachers using mastery just weren't there. It's definitely way easier just to tell everybody their work was great and give them B's and pass them along and let the next person deal with them. So that was the second issue I encountered. And so has anyone, because I stopped, like I said, I did it for 3 years, I quit. And I said, I'm done. I'm not doing this again.
I would jump in and say that based like on normal grading or the traditional grading, I had students coming in from other classes to second and third semester without the basic skills. They knew how to game the system to pass, right?
Right.
So I feel like if everybody went to standards and you had standards, like you must be able to demonstrate you can do these things. And I think that's the hard part, right? But boy, I mean, it was so frustrating when, physics 3 and these students are coming in, they don't know how to add vectors and they've forgotten basic math skills, like how to add fractions.
Basic conversion.
Oh yeah.
And Chris, you hit the nail on the head when you said gaming the system.
Yeah.
We all know that you can game a points-based system and earn an A and not learn a blankety blank thing.
Right. But
I did it. For God's sake, I did it. And so this is a wonderful opportunity. Okay. And we also know that students learn at different rates. Okay. So who's to say, and I'm just going to pick one thing that I heard you say, vector addition. Okay. I would say that is a fundamental that every student should be able to do analytically, algebraically, and numerically.
Yep.
Okay. So now is the opportunity for you to say, all right, you gamed the system before and you got away with not learning this, but now I'm going to make it a requirement that you learn this in this class, because otherwise you're going to be harmed when you go on to the next level. So this is a perfect opportunity to make that a standard. And by the way, the word standard doesn't necessarily mean a list by list rubric. It means a goal. A standard is a learning goal.
Right.
Okay. Now, how you measure that goal is entirely up to you. There are as many ways to do it as there are people on this screen right now. I do it as a binary. You either demonstrate that you can do it or you can't. That's simple. I mean, in the medical profession, our faculty colleagues who teach nursing, the patient either dies or it lives. You either give the injection correctly or you induce. You don't have to do it correctly. You either do it right or you don't. Okay. If you don't, you get another opportunity. It's up to you as to whether you allow unlimited reassessments. Now, the business world will tell you that doesn't happen in the real world. All my response to that is refer to Wall Street. Every time they crash our economy, we keep giving them another chance. So don't tell me that infinite reassessment does not happen in the real world, because it does. And we all know that. Okay, but you can cap it. You can say by this point in the semester, you should have accumulated the following requirements. I personally leave it wide open-ended because I have some students like me who are very late bloomers. And I don't want to penalize them for being a slower than average learner. The typical academic situation is biased towards the fastest learners. Those are the ones who get to grad school.
But
And I'm
is
waxing very philosophical here, so.
yeah, but is that, but I question that because I'm a late bloomer too. Gosh, I was the slowest learner. Still am to this day. It hasn't changed. But I think there's a lot of issues that are connected to this. It's not just a one-time thing. And I'm not anti-mastery. I think it's wonderful in a world where I don't have to teach 5 different classes to make a normal average income. Okay. If I could just teach 1 or 2 classes a semester, oh my goodness, I'd be the most amazing mastery instructor anywhere. But the thing is, no matter what we do, how we do it, we are still putting a time frame on them. It's like they have to complete the class by the end of the 16
The
weeks.
semester will end. Yes.
So it's whether we put the time frame on them between 4 weeks. Hey, in 4 weeks, you got to learn this by this exam. Or you say, well, you got to learn it by the 16th week. But the difference is, it almost seems, and this is, like I said, I am experienced with mastery and I've been out of it for many years. So there might be some new thought concepts I'm not aware of, but in my mind, it's friendlier to the student to put the pressure on them for smaller amounts of material to get, you've got to learn this in 4 weeks to meet this exam, than to say, well, you know what, if you don't learn it in those 4 weeks, you have until the 16th week. And I found that many students just never got there. And if I'm doing a mastery system, I'm going to have many students who don't achieve that minimum level. And it almost seems friendlier to me, you know, C's are passing, C's earn degrees, you know, and we seem to have developed this aversion to the letter grade C in society, which it's like, it's passing, it's good. There's nothing wrong with it. And all of a sudden everyone has to have A's and B's. And I'm questioning that wisdom. We're narrowing this grayscale. You have to achieve this to move on to your self-identification, to make people at 4 years happy, whatever the reasoning is. But I tell my students, get over that. A grade doesn't define who you are. It's just a snapshot of a moment in time of what was going on. That's all it is. And right. You know, me, I took, you know, I admit to everybody, I took my first physics class 3 times. I passed all 3 times. I wanted more than a C. And I knew because I had that C, I didn't learn it to the level I wanted to learn it. And I wanted to major in physics. And I knew if I didn't get to that level, that going to the next level, I was going to have a hard time. So I retook my first physics class 3 times. And everybody thought I was insane, but it was the smartest thing I could have ever done because it did get me to where I needed to be. I don't know if somebody would have gave me mastery, I still would not have learned it to the level I learned it to after 3 semesters. I don't know if my point's coming across. It took me 3 semesters. 16 weeks was not going to get me to that level no matter what I did.
I think mastery is a bit of a misnomer myself. I like the term standards. Mastery is not really the goal in my mind.
Efficiency is the goal.
Right.
Demonstration. I stopped calling it mastery. Instead of giving an MA, I switched to a PR for proficiency, because mastery is essentially perfection. And I'm sorry, I don't think any of us ever get there, despite what the grad schools would have us think. There's a lot of hypocrisy in grad school admission processes where they want all A's. They're the ones who push, they're the main stakeholder pushing this grade narrative about how you have to have the perfect grade. But I would argue that if you want to put more pressure on them in the beginning, that is not a wrong way to implement it. If that is the way you want to do it that way. The students will eventually come around. And let's face it, not everyone is going to learn everything. I had 3 students fail last semester. They're taking it again this semester because
They've
they
been-
want to show that they can do it. And they probably will. They probably will. And I'm teaching both a mechanics and an E&M. And those mechanics students, which is the class is about 50% women and about 25% high school students. And let me tell you, the buy-in is huge. Huge. H-U-G-E. The buy-in is huge. And they're like, why can't other courses do this?
So in one class, so let me ask, in one class, 3 students failed and the rest of the students got B or higher.
I didn't say that. The rest passed.
That's what I'm at. Okay, so that's what I'm asking. What were the letter grades?
Well, I don't think that's relevant. I mean, I could look it up. I've got the spreadsheet here in front of me, but I don't think that's relevant. I think if a student can demonstrate proficiency, they should get the grade that they earn, whether it's an A or a B or a C. And what you will find, I think, what has been my experience is that you will find fewer failures. And Chris, please echo. I don't want to dominate this. You will find fewer failures, and you will find that your passing grade may go up. So it might look like grade inflation, but it also maybe the students really are learning. Maybe the students really are learning. I kind of lost my train of thought where I was going with that, but putting the pressure on them earlier, that is not a wrong way to do it. I would argue that with if it's done right, there are infinite variations on how to do it right. The situation you mentioned where your colleagues maybe were not being as rigorous, I am more rigorous with this than I ever was with points-based systems. Because I can pull out my Arnold Ahrens book and I can get inside their heads and I can make them squirm in so many different ways. And it's got nothing to do with whether or not they get the right number. Because let's face it, they're going to get the right number either through TEG, Google, or whatever. But you can make them squirm by asking them questions like Arnold Ahrens. Why did you use that equation? What happens if you change this? Define your system. Why did you choose this system? Why not this system?
I don't use Ahrens, but I ask those questions anyway.
I'm sorry?
I don't use that. I don't use the Arnold Ahrens textbook, but I ask those questions about anything I assign, whether I wrote the problem or I picked it off of out of Halliday and Resnick. I tell them that I could care less what your answer is. I want to know how you did it.
Right. And there's no rule that you have to ask students the same questions. If I sense that a student is struggling, I'm going to ask them different questions than a student who is absorbing everything like a sponge. Because I really can't help that student who is absorbing everything. They're going to do fine without me. I've got to help that other student who's not learning anything. I've got to give them confidence, and I've got to help bring them up. It's very taxing mentally, at least it is for me.
So is this what you're going to talk about at our next meeting?
I'm not only going to talk about it, I'm going to demonstrate it, because I'm going to have at least 1 or 2 students join me, and we are going to do a mock assessment live, unrehearsed.
Yeah, promo that, Joe. 1 week from today, right?
I'm looking at my, I guess it is. Yeah, I guess it is.
How many of these assessments does a student get in a semester?
As many as they want until the last day. That's the way I do it.
So if a student wants to do it every day, it's all right.
No. They must wait a minimum of 24 hours from one assessment.
So every other day.
And they must make an appointment. This last semester, appointments were done manually on the fly with Apple Calendar. This semester, I'm going to use a Google form to do it, because I'll be doing this in 2 classes.
So students who are not working have greater opportunity to do these
Well,
because they have more hours free.
Well, I allow them to do it in the evening. I sometimes sacrifice my evenings to let them do this. Last semester, I let them schedule appointments as late as 9 p.m. I suspect I will do the same thing this semester.
How many students do you have a semester?
I knew that was coming. This
Total.
semester, well, my class cap is 24. Let's see, I think one section has 15 and I think the other one has 13. So I'm looking at approximately 30 students.
So I'll have a total, between my courses, I'll have a total of 50 students.
I know. And
so how do I work that in?
Well, guess what? You get to invent that. You get to define the system for doing that. You get to figure that out, because I know that, logistics is an issue. And if you do this the way I'm doing it, it doesn't scale. However, like I said, you've got to be willing to abandon the status quo. The status quo says, well, I have too many students to do this. Well, maybe your institution's business model is whack. Maybe this is a reflection, not so much of your teaching, but of and I don't mean just you, I mean everyone. This is a good time to reflect on, okay, are we treating students like cattle, or are we really serious about teaching and learning? I think we all know that debate.
Just for me, I am the calculus-based physics teacher.
Yep. Well,
Yeah, me too.
And they don't have and the state doesn't let them hire another one. We have 2 physics teachers total.
I'm the physics teacher, period, at my institution.
Right. And I don't know. You get to invent and you get to reinvent the world.
I've reinvented my classroom already. And I've reinvented it several times, and I will continue to reinvent it. But I need a more specific description than a term and general phrases. For me to use something, I need to know it well enough to manipulate it and twist it and turn it to be what I need and what my students need, and be able to change it from semester to semester as the students change from semester to semester. And I don't see what I would call extremely clear definitions of boundaries or lack of boundaries, procedures or lack of procedures. I just hear things like, well, it's sort of like, or I do this, period.
If you want a detailed, granular rubric of every aspect of a problem-solving process, you can certainly do it that way. But I would argue that you're defeating the system, because no rubric is complete.
I'm still not figuring out what from the point of view of what I need to do is know what it is from the point of view of a student. I don't care what it looks like to me. I need to know what it looks like from the side of a student.
I will let you interrogate my students next week and ask them.
Maybe
I don't know what it is from the student.
Class.
I don't know what I'm doing.
You can ask, you will have the opportunity to ask my top student next week. Jada will join us, and you can ask her. I've already told her that she is probably going to be on the receiving end of many questions. So,
and what is it like to students who are not doing well?
It's horrible. Because
so if a student is not doing well and it's horrible, is that student going to quit?
But how is that different from any other class?
No,
if a student's doing horrible.
If a student is struggling, it's because they're trying to learn under the old system that I have invalidated. They're trying to say, well, what can I do to get more points? And I'm saying, I'm sorry, there are no points in this course. That concept doesn't exist. Your only option is to learn the material.
And then
instead of gaming your way through it. Most of them give in very quickly and say, I actually have to read the damn book now. Oh my God, I've never had to do that before. Winning.
I've never had trouble with students not reading the book, at least not for the past 20 years.
I
Did
always
before
have.
then.
I have.
You are by far the
can't
exception to the rule there.
read the book.
I can open the book to the page they need and put it in front of their face and they won't read it.
Yep, I have encountered the same willful.
For my students, if they haven't read their book, they have no idea what I'm talking about. And they have no idea what the classmates are talking about.
That is also true of my students, but it doesn't make
And
them
if
read
they
the
don't know
book.
what their classmates are talking about, it is extremely embarrassing to them.
And I think part of getting this type of thing to work is to, first of all, explain to students, hey, you have been conditioned that performing tasks is equivalent to learning. And those days are over, at least in this course, because you're not even going to turn anything into me. I don't even collect homework. It's a waste of time. So they still do the homework, but instead of turning it into me for a lifetime judgment of a check mark on it, they have to present the solution to me orally. And if they can't do it, then by definition, they don't understand what they're doing. And the interview ends and we politely schedule another time.
Yeah, well, we'll get to see it next week.
It sounds like you're talking more about a verbal exam as opposed to, say, a written exam.
No, I don't do written exams. In this virtual environment, written exams are a waste of time. There's no good way to do them. Get inside their heads. Let them tell you what they do and do not understand. This is textbook Arnold Ahrens. If we listen to what the students say or don't say, they will tell us exactly what their weaknesses are, and they will tell us exactly what they need help with. We have to listen.
Well, I used to give oral exams. I do think there is a definite benefits to those, but I would not do oral exams and not have written exams. A balance too, I think, but yeah, because oral exams do give you an insight there that can be extremely helpful. But an oral exam doesn't check to see whether a problem can solve a problem from beginning to end.
Oh, yes, it can. Yes, it can.
Not from
Absolutely.
beginning to end.
Oh, yes.
Check problem solving skills. I agree with that.
Because I sometimes ask them to solve a problem in real time. That is part of the interview.
Okay, so if
I reserve the right to ask them.
They
that.
don't get to write their stuff down. They don't get to write, like if you're asking them to solve a problem,
They
don't
write it on a whiteboard with me watching. It's just not on a piece of
there's
paper.
a written component to the exam then. It's not
There
just
can be. I'm not saying there always is. I'm saying if I see that there is a need for it, I reserve the right to say, okay, let's pick a simpler problem here, solve it for me.
Yeah, we'll get details on this in Joe's presentation next week. I'm happy to hang out for a few minutes. I got to meet with a student in 20 minutes or so, but yeah, this is all the kind of discussion that we wanted to have today. What works, what doesn't, what do we worry about? Although I will say I'll chime in with my 2 cents on sort of the general topic of what should I do. You should do what works for you. The biggest thing I have taken away from all of my experiences in workshops and meetings and whatever with through AAPT and other professional developments is that I need to find the things that work for me and my students and apply them in a way that is comfortable for me and my students, and not listen and take in what other people are suggesting as possibility, but it is not prophecy. This is not,
I like to pick and choose pieces.
Yeah, Joe does great things. I don't do everything like Joe because, well, I'm not Joe.
And not everything I do works.
Yeah, and also I think that's the other thing that I would add on to is accept failure. and I tell my students this, you know, you'll learn a lot more from falling on your face than skating through this. My new phrase is being frustrated with your physics class is like sweating at the gym. It means you're doing it right.
Mhm.
Yeah. 'Cause I like to pick and choose little pieces of this and little pieces of that that will fit my students and add it in and blend it in. And like Thomas said, end up with something that works for my students and for me. And usually takes about five years of discussion with people before I understand what they're doing. When it's an hour at a time. If I sit down with somebody 3 days straight through, literally, then I can understand what they're doing completely after 3 days of conversation. But if it's going to be an hour presentation without hours of questions afterwards, it takes about 5 years. And so I prefer to find someone, well, when meetings were in person, find someone who was doing something interesting during a time when they had no presentation, sit down with them at the coffee pot or on a chair or something and just ask questions and then listen to them talk for 2 hours with questions put in here and there to find out not the words, not even the thoughts, or I should say not the words, not the processes, but the abstract thought behind it all, to get at the kernel of it and then how it builds out rather than starting from the surface and working in. Have to get to the middle and then work back out so I can imagine what every one of my students is going to experience, not what the average effect is going to be. Then I can use it, because then I can know what they're going to see, hear, and as time passes, how to adjust it from day to day to fit how the students change from day to day.
I just put a name over in the chat box, Matt Townsend. You might want to Google him because he has an extensive SVG blog that is just chock full of resources.
Let me copy that down.
I got most of my ideas from Kelly O'Shea, who is active on Twitter, and Frank Nisgazy, who is active on Twitter, Josh Gates. Now, these are all high school teachers, and Andy Runquist at Hamline University in Minnesota. Those were the people who pushed me over the edge to switch to SVG, and it was Dwayne Davian who pushed me over the edge to move to oral assessments last semester. I had been trying to do oral assessments for about 2 years, and I was just afraid to take the plunge, but I finally jumped off, and I don't ever want to go back. Even when we resume classroom teaching, I still want to do it this way. I just don't want to go back to the old way.
Now, one problem I have, and I'd like to know how you deal with this if it's a problem, is if I start talking with a student and asking a student questions, and the student starts answering, I will get extremely interested. And if there is not something somewhere, some whistle that blows that says, okay, time's up, you have to stop, I will, without noticing, end up listening to that student and asking questions to that student for 2 hours.
What's the problem?
If I'm going to do that for 2 hours, which I don't care, and if it's at a time when a student can do it, that's okay. If it's at night, it's okay. I just can't do it online because of epilepsy. If I look at a computer screen for more than an hour in a bright room, I will have a seizure. If I look at a computer screen in a dark room, I'll have a seizure within 10 minutes, which is why I don't know if you've noticed, but I've closed my eyes from time to time while watching the screen. And I still have not figured out, and a lot of my students have not figured out because they don't have the equipment for it, how to draw a picture to use to explain something to me. Because a lot of my students have only a Google Chrome, only a Chromebook, which they got in high school. And they tell me that they can't do that on a Chromebook. I can't do it on my computer that my college gave me. The college gave me a laptop. And how do you take that into account? Because most of the reasoning, at least when I do physics, is pictures, not equations. Words and pictures.
There are a couple of options there. First of all, regarding the time thing, just tell them up front, we can't let this go further or any longer than X number of minutes for medical reasons that you don't have to disclose if you don't want. I
have to tell them I have seizures. That's required.
I do limit the assessment appointments to a maximum of 30 minutes, unless it's the last one of the day or unless no one is booked for the next slot. I tried, if a student wants to talk, I will try to let them talk because that tells me they're engaged. But I would say just, tell them up front, okay, we're not letting this go any longer than X number of minutes.
Yeah.
Regarding the Chromebook thing, I've had similar situations. I've never used the web version of Zoom, and from what I gather, it works very differently from the desktop client. But I think the Zoom whiteboard still works. Another option, huh?
It works, but it is horrid.
Oh, it's not easy. It's a pain. You just got to get used to it. Another option would be to use a tablet and join the meeting with the tablet and share the tablet screen. Another option would be to have them share their screen and use an online whiteboard, of which there are probably hundreds if you Google around.
Yeah.
It's just a tremendous, for me, the electronic whatever, whiteboard, blackboard, paper, but it's just different to write on. And it is simply a matter of spending time adjusting. But for me, I had bad handwriting, indecipherable pictures to start with. And I just tell students, I say, you're gonna not be able to read this stuff. You need to say, I can't read that stuff. Tell me what it says. I can't tell what your picture is. Put a label on that. I had to label horse in a problem the other day because I had drawn a stick horse and no one knew what it was. And so I had to just write HORSE, this thing. It's just adjusting to, it's just adjusting to the tech. It's,
students will find a tech solution before I will. They'll say, oh, I'm using this cool online whiteboard, coolonlinewhiteboard.com that I've never even heard of before. And my experience has been that they will find a solution. The engaged students will find a solution and they will find a way to get the message across. That has been my experience.
Yeah,
it would work for most.
Meeting students where they are also tends to work. Like saying, how do you guys want to do this? Has worked quite well for me. It does mean that I'm routinely figuring out new stuff, which is not necessarily bad, but is an investment of my time. But I like to pretend I pretend that I get paid for that, and the institution pretends to pay me for that, and all is well.
I'm just trying to figure out how to work it in since I'm already doing overtime for the college. And I'm trying to figure out how to do what you're saying in less than 60 hours a week.
I do. If you figure it out, let me know, because I don't do it either.
Because I can't do it. I can't do it beyond 60 to 80 hours a week, or I will have to go to the hospital.
Yeah. You get to figure that out.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem, but I
I
haven't
will
solved that.
say that I am, this is perverse because I think I'm probably in the minority. I like using these technological tools. I like having the freedom to talk with students in the evening when it's convenient with them. Let's face it, they're not going to come to campus after working an 8-hour shift, getting off at 8:30 or 9 p.m. They're simply not going to do it. So in some ways, I am now more connected with my students than I was before. And I'm going to be very loath to give that up when we get back to on campus. I'm going to work very hard to try to allow for some sort of virtual presence, because students who otherwise would not be able to participate in the course are now participating.
One problem right now that I've got with about 25% of my students is Chromebooks don't have cameras.
Yep. Yep. An old Chromebook is a problem. Yep.
And as I said, that's what
I
a lot
gave
of
up
them
on
have.
cameras because I had too many students that either didn't have one, period,
Or
for
would
whatever technological, or were in a shared space, and really it wasn't good for them to turn it on
I had
for
one
whatever reason,
student
so I just gave up.
in calc-based last semester, and he's taking second semester now. He doesn't have a camera, and he doesn't even have a microphone. So we did his assessment via chat and via the whiteboard. He could share his screen, so I could say, okay, pull up your solution to problem number 12 or whatever, and I would still say, talk me through it, and he would write it all out in the chat. It was a pain and it pressed my patience, but I felt obligated to do it. And here he is in second semester. He's a very good student. Never seen his face. I have no idea what the kid's face looks like. But he can solve the problems, he can write the code, and he can verbally explain his thought processes. There's just something euphoric about this whole experience that it's just very difficult to put into words. I didn't see all of this coming. I don't think that I would have gone to the oral interview. I call them interviews. I don't even call them assessments. I call them interviews. I don't think I would have done this had we been, had we stayed on campus.
What do you do with labs?
Mostly computation, which is good because the curriculum that we use, Matter and Interactions by Shabai and Sherwood, integrates computation in. Every chapter has computational projects. So we do mostly computation, and that's what we were doing beforehand. There's just been so much evidence questioning the existence of traditional physics labs. I'll be very honest, I think most of them are a waste of time. Because if they major in physics, they're going to take an experimental course anyway. If they're going into engineering, they're going to take a whole year of static stuff. If they're going into mechanical stuff, they're going to take a whole year of circuits if they're going into electrical. And again, part of switching to Matter and Interactions, which we did in 1999, means being willing to abandon the status quo. So we don't do the traditional labs and haven't for 20 years. And our students have not been harmed by that. There are a couple labs that we do, like we did one where we would measure the Young's modulus of a wire in the classroom. Obviously can't do that one very easily now. But the coming out, so to speak, of computation has been a huge boon. Students get far more value from that than they do than measuring things rolling down inclined planes.
But I do have a comment about that, because I agree about the computation. I'm building a whole bunch of classes to include the computation. So my question is though, what I'm finding is the vast majority of my students, I'd probably say 75% of my students coming into my classes can't even use a ruler or a protractor.
Mhm.
So if they don't learn it in high school, because high school said, oh, you'll learn it in college. So, you know, everyone keeps passing the buck up. And I think I'm noticing a theme to everything I'm saying today. It's always somebody's passing the buck up.
Mhm.
At what point does someone acquire these skills that we all consider, you know, part of physics? You know, when does someone learn to use a ruler? When does someone learn to use a protractor? So are we saying now we just throw all that in graduate school?
No, no.
One thing I've talked to with my students and when I speak with them to assess me is they tell me that it required the physics lab for them to learn the difference, real difference between velocity and acceleration. They tell me that without the lab, which was before the mathematics and before the equations, without the lab, they said they would not have believed, for lack of a better word, that beyond mathematics, there was much difference between velocity and acceleration. They knew the equations. If I gave them a formula for position, they could find the formula for velocity and the formula for acceleration. But they could not tell me how acceleration is different from velocity as a physical property of material, rather than as a mathematical expression. They say that in the labs, they learned that it was more than just a mathematical expression, that it is something real that happens. Students have said things like, I will always remember this one that a student said, I ruined his vacation because he was on vacation after taking my thermodynamics course at a pool, floating on an inflatable raft. And he could not enjoy it because as he sat there floating on the inflatable raft, he recognized that he was being lifted by the water, pushing on the bottom of the raft. And as the raft went deeper, the water pushed up more. And he just kept rolling buoyancy as it relates to that raft. And he couldn't forget it. I've had students come back and say when they come back, they'll go over to U of I for a year and they'll come back and they'll say that after my physics course, they could not prevent themselves from seeing force arrows and velocity arrows and acceleration arrows in real life situations. And I don't know how much of that is due to the labs, how much of that is due to classroom, how much of that is due to just individual effort and would have happened whether I was there or not. But
That's again, to me, that's just the thing I was trying to get to. That's a style thing.
yeah.
That style of instruction really works for you
Mhm.
and your students.
It sounds like you're
And-
making a huge
Yeah.
influence on them.
And it
Whatever you're
may
doing.
not for us. I have a broad swath of students. I do computation, I do hands-on labs, I use simulations, I do all of those. And what I found is that being flexible with students and telling them, try all of these, but find the ones that work best for you has been the most successful overall.
For
I've
E&M,
recently done that.
we use these Pasco circuit kits for the E&M. They were actually invented as part of the Shabbai and Sherwood curriculum. So this is what we use second semester. In addition to computation, it's more of a traditional thing. But whatever you're doing sounds like it's working. So keep doing it. And you know,
Yeah.
we get to do what's best for our students. That's the That's the
That's the
joy.
goal there. Well, I've got to go, speaking of students,
Okay.
I've got to go meet with a student. So, and since I'm the host, it'd be hard to continue without me, but.
Okay, goodbye.
We'll see you guys next week for Joe's presentation. I'll try and send out all the links again in good time. And they should
I
be
want you to-
posted on the Slack channel as well. I think they
And
already
keep
are.
pushing back on everything that I say, because that helps me.
That's the value in these things.
That's the value.
Yeah, and I like that. I like you saying what you're saying and everybody saying what they're saying. And I'm not saying I'm right or you're right or anybody's right. I like this sort of conversation where everybody puts in what they've got and it really doesn't matter who's right. Because probably none of us are.
And as long as the students learn, that's all that
Yeah.
really matters.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I got to go. I'll see you guys
Okay.
soon. I'm going to end this. I'll post the video to YouTube and put links up and stuff.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Bye.
Okay.